Hello, Bad Bobar here. Hey, these are some of the stoves I've built to develop my road to a capillary stove. I've made them to the point where they are like wicks, but I did like that other one that turned the rim into a capillary stove. These are all very interesting stoves. First, I started out with a penny stove, and then an accident with the penny stove gave me a little blue bud, and the blue bud I used to melt wax and stuff like that. I can actually reduce the bud because the air comes in underneath from the holes and comes through. Then I made the capillary wick, capillary pressure stove wick. Now the capillary pressure stove wick is awesome. It does what a small pressure stove does, but the only thing about this is it's smaller, and you have to have a fuel system and support and everything. But they're customizable, and they can go into practically anything. I can make them longer, shorter, wider, different shapes, different forms. I like the stuff I develop. Sometimes I get lucky, when something works. I like it. Now this is 5-up stove I've done. Some poor penny stove died for this, but they that one wick is damaged. This penny stove was filled up. Now, not filled up, but has just a little bit of fuel in it. That's what happens when you get a little tiny bit of fuel in on a wick, even a bad one. That's a bad wick, by the way. But even a bad wick, it will actually just have a little tiny bud. It will suck it up until there's nothing left to suck up. So it'll vacuum it up like a vacuum cleaner. That's a better capillary wick. Pressure stove. I've actually had them where they shoot flames out straight like a torch, but I find that I don't want that because I want to use it as a stove, as a close quarter stove, but it can be done. As you can see, I even made all sorts of penny stoves and that, but I couldn't control them, as you could see on the first part of the videos. But the second part shows how I wanted to control the flames. Now, it is still a penny pressure stove. Now, if it heats up enough, it is going to flare out and bloom. And when this thing blooms, with the enhanced hole designs that I used in order to use the pressure wicks, oh, she's nice. But yeah, at first I wasn't sure how strong it was going to be, but it's nice. If you prime it before you start any of the wicks, to start all 5 wicks at the same time and prime it, it will actually start the pressure stove up all at once, and you won't have to wait so long for it. But now you don't have to prime this at all now, because you see this is just a fuel bowl to the pressure wick, because it just needs fuel. It doesn't need it at high pressure. It produces its own pressure, right? And now it shoots flames out the top, even if it's only a little tiny bud. Now this fuel system I developed to feed these wicks basically controls the level. So as the level of the fuel goes up on the wick, so does the flame. It can go up very high if I build it right. But those kind of stoves you got to be careful with, because they shoot out so much that they become useless. Don't need a torch, but I guess you could if you wanted to refine it. So now we're talking here with a pressure stove. Is actually going to, well, it should heat up. Now afterwards, I started going to a chimney and rocket stoves, because they're being used for wood burning. But I mean, people are missing the point on those things. Oxygen injection systems are just optimum for burning, especially for stoves. And I'm thinking, less fuel, more air, and get the fuel up in there so that in its own draft hold itself up, hold its own. The fuel will force itself out like a small low-powered rocket or something, or a jet. That's what a jet stove or a rocket stove is basically. The air has to rise, and it sucks up all the exhaust with it, so sucks in more and more fresh air. It's the same with the chimney stove. It has to heat up first. And thusly, it also allows me, if I do it right, to isolate the fuel from the burning chamber, even though the fuel can drip, any fuel that's left over can drip back into the chamber. If I use the right chamber, it won't actually ignite because it won't have any air to ignite. It'll just fall into the fuel. And the fuel will stay cool. So it means popping and sudden flare-ups should be reduced significantly as long as the fuel stays cool outside of the capillary pressure wick stove. And it seems to like cold fuel better so it doesn't pop than it does hot fuel, because then it starts to pop more. So there's an advantage to that. In the cold, I could see it. It burns just like a wick. As you can see, this thing just rocks when that penny stove kicks in. I also am working on a camping stove that uses similar principles to this, but you'll see how much better the other one is because you don't get a lot of red flaming with the stoves that I built later on, because I'm using more air than I normally would be able to use, and I use a low volume fuel, so this way I can control the temperature of it, and it just as much fuel as I need. I don't need any more than that. Then I don't have to deal with it. If I want to boil a little bit of fuel, I can boil a little bit of fuel. Or I can turn the system around and make steam, sterilize water, distill stuff with it. Temperature. It's just limitless, these devices that I made. But what they can do is basically they spread temperature to zones that are totally isolated from other zones, and if you can do that, you can do all sorts of things. Just as long as you know the situation, you can control it. Now, I've put this water in and it just boils fast. I've boiled a cup of water in there. This burn actually went for 15 minutes. Now, my favorite one of those was that little tea light stove. I made that in the beginning, that one that was in the beginning there. I put that into that other cup, and that's the primer cup and the burning cup, so it keeps it from burning, what is below it. So you light that up, and it starts burning on the edge up the edge. So it acts like a capillary wick, but not quite, because it's a little too, just enough. Actually, it does act like a capillary wick. So I didn't realize that till now. And then that full pressure stove is within that. So what happens is anything that's down there for priming goes there. Plus it has a second level of foil to cool off, and it keeps the stove cool. But this thing shoots like a flame. I mean, once it starts going, it takes practically no time at all. A half ounce goes about 6 minutes, but it shoots out 4 flames, and you put the penny in the middle. You can put the penny on off the middle, but it doesn't burn as well, and flames, it's just too much, and a little more pressure conserves the fuel, and it goes longer and it goes hotter. So a little penny stove, that was my favorite. But see, this remote fuel system that you're looking at now here, that's a chimney stove, by the way, and basically air is sucked up across a burning torch. I've made a torch within a cap, with air coming up the sides. So any fuel that comes up gets basically sucked up into the vacuum. Now this one is an interesting one. This is the burn of a rocket stove. It is phenomenal. That's just a camping portable fire stand. It's really awesome for stuff like this. And did you see that you can put 2 of them? I could have multiple feet. I can have like a little blue bud, or I can have this thing shoot up like 9 inches, possibly 10. I never put a ruler on it. This is a concept stove. This is the concept in order to lighten it up, but once it works, I think, well, it can't fail. This one here, well, that's the stove.